This week, I'll be showing you how to find the balance lines on the In-House Patterns Ellen Pants. Now, if you'd like to follow along with your own version of the Ellen Pant pattern, I'll leave a link to the pattern on this page. If you're working with another pant pattern, you'll likely get some information on how to find the balance lines on that pattern too. But today, we'll be working specifically with the Ellen Pants. I'm Alexandra Morgan from In-House Patterns and In-House Pattern Studio. If you're not sure what balance lines are or why it might be helpful to know where they are on your pattern, I'll leave some helpful links for you on this page that will explain all of that. Let's take a look at the Ellen Pant pattern. So here we have the In-House Patterns Ellen Pant. So this is just the technical drawing that I wanted to show you. There are two views in this pattern. The first view, which is view A, is an ankle length pant with a waistline position that sits about 2 inches below the waistline. What we're going to work with today is view A because it is an ankle length pant. So you're going to get kind of a really good idea about how to set up the balance lines on pretty much any pant pattern, at least get you started there. Now you can see here I have the front pattern and I have the back pattern here. There is a waistband as well. Now the waistband is a contour waistband, which means that it wraps around from front to back. So there's a center back seam in the waistband, and it actually is designed to fit sort of the contour shape of the lowered waistline of this pant. I've got the front patterns piece, and I've also got my pocket bag piece, which I've just actually included or taped to the front pattern because it completes this whole front pattern piece. When you have your size cut out, I want you to go in and draw in all the seam lines on the pant. Now you can see here that I've already marked the balance lines in, but I'm going to walk it through with you. So what we're going to do first is I want you to always start with your front pattern piece. When you have your pattern all ready to go and you've taped in this little pocket bag piece, this pocket bag section to get your full front pattern piece, the easiest balance line to find right off the bat on this specific pattern is the knee line. And that's because I have notches indicating exactly where the knee line is on this pattern. So you're just going to find the notches that are kind of midway on the leg here, and you're just going to draw a line that's straight across and join notch to notch. Now the next line I want you to determine, which is going to be the grain line. The grain line on all pants should be midway between the knee position and the hem. So what I want you to do to find the actual true grain line of the pant, that whatever you're working with, and specifically the Ellen Pant as we're working with today, you're going to measure from seam line to seam line at the knee line and find the midway point and just make a mark. You're going to do the same thing way down here at the hemline. So you're going to measure from seam line to seam line at your hemline and find the midpoint. When you find those two midpoints, you're going to join them. And this is going to be the center line of your leg. So you can draw that in. And then when you get to the knee, I want you to continue that line straight up all the way to the top of the pant. So then you're going to have your grain line for the pant going through the center of the leg. Don't worry about it if it's not center up here. It's not supposed to be. It has to be center of the knee, center of the hem. Now once you have the grain line in, you can then draw in the crotch line. So the crotch line on the front of the pant always is an extension from the very, very point of the crotch point here of the front. So this is the front fork, it's often called, or front extension. And what you're going to do is basically draw a line that intersects with the seam line here at the crotch point and is perpendicular to the grain line that you have here. So you're just going to find those intersecting points. So you're going to go from this point here, you're going to make sure that you're going to be drawing a perpendicular line from the grain line that you just set in, and this is going to be your crotch line. The next thing you're going to draw in is the thigh line. Now the thigh is always measured 1 inch below the crotch depth line. So the thigh line is 1 inch below that crotch line that you just determined. So you can just take your ruler and draw in a new line 1 inch below the crotch line to get your thigh line. Okay? Now, here comes a little bit trickier part. I have indicated the 5th balance line that you're going to find here is going to be the hip line. Now, since I'm working with a size 8, I know from my mannequin, which is the base size of this pattern is starting with a size 8, I know that from the knee to the hip level at the front on my mannequin is going to be 16 inches. So this is just the measurement on the body. So what I've done here is I've measured from my knee up 16 inches along the true grain line here and marked in where the hip line is actually going to be sitting in comparison with the knee. Now, if you're working with a different size, what I'm going to do is give you a little chart below for these other indications, because of course the knee position is going to change per size and the hip position is going to change per size. Now the high hip position on this pattern is going to be in the waistband area, because the waistband actually sits 2 inches below the waist, and then we've also got a waistband, right? So the waistband is actually going to have the high hip line on it. So if that is an important measurement for you in terms of where you think that you need to fit your garment, I want you to make sure that you do add your waistband to your front pattern piece so you can kind of determine where the high hip line is. So as I said, what I've done is I've just taken this front part of the waistband, and you can easily just place it on your front pattern piece, matching up your seam lines and the center front line of the pant pattern and the waistband, and just lay them together. On a size 8, the high hip line position is 4 inches from the hip line position. So you must find the hip position before you can find the high hip position in this case, because we don't really know where the waistline is. The waistline, the natural waistline, is not a part of this pattern. It is sitting below that point. So we kind of have to work from the bottom up. Now, once again, the high hip position is going to be different if you're working with different sizes. Now that we've marked them all on the front, we can now transfer this information to our back pattern. So let's quickly go over that. Okay, so similar to what we did with the front, I want you to be sure that you take the time to draw in all your seam lines onto your back pattern piece as well. Now we're going to start in really the same fashion. The knee line on the Ellen Pant pattern is marked with a notch. So what I want you to do is draw in the knee line on your back pattern, just as you did the front. You're going to next find your grain line, the true grain line of the back pattern. And again, that's just going to be a matter of finding the halfway distance between the seam line and seam line of the knee line, and then doing the same thing exactly at the hemline. So you're going to find the midpoint of the hemline between the two seam line edges. Once you have those midpoints, you're then going to join them together. This is going to be your true grain line, which you are going to extend all the way up in a straight line to the top edge of your pant. You're going to have your knee and your grain line marked in at that point. The next thing you are going to do is you're going to need your front pattern piece in order to determine where the hip line is on this back part. The pant pattern becomes a little bit skewed on the back pattern piece. In other words, your hip line and your thigh line are not going to be perpendicular to the grain line on most pant patterns. Some of them will be, depends how they're built. But generally, in order to get enough room to actually be able to sit in your pants, when pants are developed, you usually create a wedge at the back, so it gives you some extra length when you're sitting, because you need that extra length to go around your buttocks when you're sitting. It's longer when you're sitting than when you're standing. So what I've done now is just brought in my front pattern piece, and I'm going to walk my pattern. I'm going to walk it from the hemline all the way up to the waistline. So again, I'm starting at the bottom. I'm going to walk it as if I'm stitching this garment together. So again, I have to flip over my pattern so that right sides are together. And you're going to notice that I've conveniently put in the notches that belong to each of the lines that I want to transfer to the back piece. So you should already have a hem notch that's already on the pattern. And you also have a knee notch, and you're just going to follow along with those notches. And when you get to the point where your front pattern starts to skew away from the back pattern, what I want you to do is pivot it. So I'm putting my pencil down on the seam line because I can just happen to see through this pattern paper. And I'm going to just rock my pattern and walk it as I go along until I see my next notch. I'm going to color in that notch right here so that I know that that is going to be where my thigh line is. Now I'm not going to put the crotch line onto the back pattern, but you can, if you want to, by all means, just create another notch there. Notice that the crotch line here is not the same as this notch here, and that's because this notch belongs to the pocket construction, so don't get confused by that. So this is why I am just marking the thigh line there with the red pencil here, and that's going to be where my thigh line is on my back pattern. Now I can continue walking my pattern, and I'm just going to keep going until I get to my next notch, which I know is actually my hip notch. So then I'm going to color that in. That's the hip line notch that I'm transferring from the front to the back, and as I go I can see that I've hit my my seam line here at the top. And what you're going to find is when you have that, those positions, you're going to score a line that is perpendicular to the cut line and the seam line of the garment. And then you're going to use that point where it intersects with your seam line as the point where you're going to draw in your thigh line. But as I said, it's not going to be perpendicular from the grain line because we also have to walk the inseam of our pant. We know that in most pant patterns, the length of this back pattern section between the crotch point and the knee is actually shorter than the front. And the reason it's shorter is just simply to eliminate just a touch of the excess fabric that you have in the length in the back. It also gives the front an opportunity to kind of go over the roundness of your thigh. So there's a subtle little fitting thing by having slightly different lengths at the inseam here from the knee to the crotch point. So I already know that we have indicated 1 inch below the crotch point of the front. So you can actually measure 1 inch down here at the inseam. Or if you're not sure, just walk your front pattern onto your back to get this point again. This is going to be the other point that you're going to use for your thigh line on your back. So I'm going to then just join those 2 points to get my thigh line here at the back. Now you're going to notice that it is not perpendicular to the grain line. It can be on some pant patterns, but it's not exactly perfect here for this particular pattern. So don't worry about that. It's correct as long as you've walked it from your front pattern. Your front is the boss of the back in this case. Finding the true position of the hip line at the center back area of the pant is a little bit more difficult. As you know, we just discovered how to find the position at the side seam because we've used the information from the front pattern piece. Finding it here at the center back is tricky because most patterns will have a wedge type alteration in the center back seam in order to allow a little bit extra length in order for you to sit and move around in your pants. So most pants will have this slanted center back seam, which is going to allow you to have a little bit thinner thigh, but still be able to meet the needs of your seated body. So what I like to do to find the balance lines for the hip line is I will actually find it by first creating sort of a wedge area, which is a target for balancing the balance line in the back. So you can see here I have two blue dotted lines. This is indicating my sort of margin for error that I can use when fitting the back hip line on the pant. So the first line is going to be a line that is perpendicular to this lovely grain line that we created at the previous step. So all I'm doing here is taking the point here at the side seam, which I discovered from using my front pattern, and I'm just creating a line that is perpendicular to my true grain line. So all I've done is use this intersecting point here at the side seam line, and I'm making sure that this new line that I'm going to draw is perpendicular to the true grain line here. And I'm just making a dotted line to indicate a possible position of the hip balance line at center back. Now the other thing I can do, because my center back seam on the Ellen Pant here is slanted, what I'm going to do is draw another possible hip line that's going to go perpendicular to the center back line and also intersecting with that line that is following what we found on the front. So this is just perpendicular from the center back, and I've drawn another dotted line. So this is sort of the wedge area. If you put these two dotted lines in on any pant pattern, you know that you can use anything between these two lines to try and help you balance and determine kind of what you need to do to make your fitting changes. On the Ellen pattern, I have indicated the hip line by using this notch right here. So it's the notch that is closest to the crotch extension here that you can use as the hip line. So what I've done here for the hip line on the Ellen Pant is gone from this side seam position that we copied from the front and drawing a straight line to the lower notch here on this particular Ellen Pant. So I have three kind of positions or possible positions that I can use for a hip balance line at center back. So this area might get a little bit confusing, but if you allow yourself to be within reasonably balanced kind of between this wedge shape area, you're probably still going to be pretty successful with your pant fitting. So that's how we determined the hip position at center back. Use the waistband as your guide to the high hip line, because you know that that high hip line is actually somewhere in that waistband area. Now that you know how to find the balance lines on the Ellen Pant pattern, you can use them as a guide to determine the fitting adjustments you'll need to make the pattern fit you. Although there are some exceptions, your goal here is to have the balance lines hang parallel and perpendicular to the floor. When the balance lines are hanging in this grid-like way on your body, you'll find that most of the drag lines and wrinkles will relax and disappear. I'll chat with you soon. Bye for now.